Most people think the loudest part of a divorce is the screaming. They expect shattered vases, thrown wedding rings, and threats shouted across a courtroom. But they are wrong. The most dangerous part of a divorce is the silence. When Mark Vance handed his wife Elise the divorce papers, he expected a war. He expected her to fight for every cent of the empire he thought he built. Instead, she picked up a pen, signed her name without looking up, and walked out. Mark thought he had won. He thought she was weak. He had no idea that her silence wasn't a surrender, it was a countdown. And when that countdown hit 0 on the tarmac of Teterboro Airport, Mark was about to learn that some ex-wives don't leave with alimony. They leave in a Gulf Stream. The conference room on the 42nd floor of the Vance & Compey building smelled of stale coffee and expensive leather, a scent that Elise had grown to detest over the last 5 years. Outside, the New York City skyline was gray and weeping rain against the glass, matching the somber mood of the lawyers gathered around the mahogany table. Or rather, the mood Elise's lawyers were supposed to have. Mark sat at the head of the table, checking his Rolex Daytona every 30 seconds. He tapped his fingers on the glass surface, a nervous tic he had developed whenever he felt he was the smartest person in the room. Next to him sat Tiffany, his executive assistant, though everyone in the tri-state area knew she was the reason they were sitting here today. She was wearing a dress that was inappropriate for a legal proceeding and scrolling through Instagram bored. Let's go over this one last time. Mark's lawyer, a pit bull of a man named Sterling Archer, no relation to the agency, just an unfortunate coincidence of ego, slammed a thick binder shut. Elise, you are waiving your right to the primary residence in the Hamptons. You are waiving your claim to the stock options in Vance Logistics. You are accepting a one-time cash settlement of $50,000 and retaining ownership of the 2018 Honda Civic. Is that correct? Elise sat with her hands folded in her lap. She wore a simple beige cardigan and minimal makeup. To Mark, she looked exactly like the woman he had married 6 years ago, a quiet, unassuming librarian he had met at a charity gala. He had chosen her because she was safe, because she looked at him with adoration, because she didn't ask questions when he stayed out late, closing deals. "That is correct," Elise said softly. Her voice was steady, devoid of the tremors Mark had expected. Mark scoffed, a jagged sound that cut through the room. "Elise, really? You're not even going to fight for the dog, or the artwork." "I don't want the art, Mark. It's all modern prints you bought to impress your investors. They have no soul." Tiffany snickered, hiding her mouth behind a manicured hand. "Soul doesn't pay the bills, sweetie." Elise turned her gaze to Tiffany. It wasn't an angry look. It was the look a scientist might give a bacteria culture in a petri dish, mild curiosity mixed with pity. "No, Tiffany, it doesn't. But neither does Mark usually. The company has been leveraging debt for 3 quarters. I hope you're good at budgeting." Mark slammed his hand on the table. "Enough. Just sign the damn papers, Elise. I have a flight to catch. We're celebrating the IPO launch in Paris." "Ah, yes, the IPO," Elise said, picking up the heavy fountain pen. "Going public. The dream. You wouldn't understand high finance, Elise." Mark sneered, adjusting his silk tie. "You've spent the last 6 years organizing bookshelves and baking bread. You're lucky I'm generous enough to give you the 50 grand. Consider it severance pay for a mediocre marriage." Elise's lawyer, a quiet man named Mr. Henderson, whom she had hired from a strip mall firm, looked like he wanted to object. Elise silenced him with a subtle touch to his forearm. "Mediocre," she repeated, testing the word on her tongue. "Okay, Mark." She uncapped the pen. The sound of the nib scratching against the paper was the only sound in the room. Scratch, scratch, scratch. She signed the divorce decree. She signed the non-disclosure agreement regarding the company's internal affairs. She signed away her claim to the penthouse, the cars, and the life she had supposedly built with him. She capped the pen and slid the papers across the mahogany table. "Done," she said, standing up. Mark grabbed the papers, checking the signature as if he expected her to have written "Go to hell" instead of her name. He grinned a predatory showing of teeth. "Well, that was easier than I thought. I honestly expected you to cry." "I cried when I found out you were sleeping with Tiffany 3 years ago," Elise said matter-of-factly, gathering her purse. "I cried when you missed my mother's funeral to play golf. I don't have any tears left for this, Mark. I just have relief." Mark laughed, standing up and wrapping an arm around Tiffany's waist. "Relief? You're walking out of here a middle-aged divorcee with a Honda Civic and no job. I'm walking out a CEO about to ring the bell on Wall Street. But sure, you keep your relief." He tossed a set of keys across the table. They slid and fell off the edge, landing at Elise's feet. "The keys to the apartment. You have 24 hours to vacate. Tiffany wants to redecorate by Monday." Elise bent down, picked up the keys, and placed them gently on the table. "I moved out 3 days ago, Mark. The keys are yours." She turned and walked toward the door. "Hey, Elise," Mark called out, feeling the need for one last jab. "If you need a reference for a library job, let me know. I know people on the board." Elise paused at the door. She didn't turn around. "Goodbye, Mark. Enjoy Paris. I hear the weather is unpredictable this time of year." She walked out. "God, she's pathetic," Tiffany muttered, nuzzling into Mark's neck. "She's history," Mark corrected. "Come on. Let's go to the airport. The world is finally ours." Teterboro Airport in New Jersey is the playground of the elite. It is where the 0.1% go to avoid the indignity of taking off their shoes at TSA checkpoints. However, even within Teterboro, there are levels to the hierarchy. There are the charter flyers, people who rent a small Cessna or a Learjet for a few hours. Then there are the fractional owners, people who own a slice of a plane. And then there are the whales. The ones who own the heavy iron, the Global 7500s, the Gulfstreams. Mark Vance felt like a king as he pulled his rented Cadillac Escalade up to the curb of the charter terminal. He wasn't a whale yet, but with the IPO launching next week, he felt like one. He had chartered a mid-sized Hawker 800 for the trip to Paris. It wasn't the biggest plane, and it would require a fuel stop in Iceland, but it was private. That was all that mattered. "Babe, look," Tiffany said, pulling down her sunglasses as they stepped onto the tarmac. Is that Elise?" Mark froze. He squinted against the harsh afternoon sun. About 50 yards away, standing near the entrance of the VIP lounge, was a woman. She was wearing a trench coat, dark sunglasses, and a silk scarf wrapped around her head, reminiscent of 1960s Hollywood royalty. But the posture was unmistakable. "It is," Mark muttered, confused. "What the hell is she doing here? Did she follow us?" "Maybe she's stalking you," Tiffany gasped, clutching his arm. "She wants to ruin our trip." Mark straightened his jacket. "Not on my watch." He marched over, dragging Tiffany and their Louis Vuitton luggage behind him. As he got closer, he saw Elise standing next to a pile of vintage leather travel trunks, the kind that cost more than a car. She was checking something on a sleek, transparent tablet. "Elise!" Mark barked. She didn't jump. She simply turned her head, slowly sliding her sunglasses down the bridge of her nose. Her eyes were cool, amused even. "Mark, Tiffany, you made good time," she said. "What are you doing here?" Mark demanded, gesturing around the exclusive tarmac. "This is a private airport, Elise. The Greyhound bus station is in Newark." Tiffany giggled nastily. "I'm traveling, Mark, same as you," Elise said, tapping the screen of her tablet. "Traveling with what money?" Mark laughed incredulously. "I just gave you 50 grand. A charter flight to anywhere costs half of that. Are you blowing your entire settlement on one flight to where, Florida?" "Actually, I'm heading to Europe as well," Elise said. "Europe?" Tiffany stepped in, looking Elise up and down. "Honey, you can't afford Europe. Not the way we do it. We're flying private. You're probably looking for the employee entrance to clean the bathrooms." Elise smiled. It was a terrifying smile. It didn't reach her eyes, but it sharpened her cheekbones. "I'm not flying charter, Mark," Elise said softly. Oh, right, Mark mocked. Did you find a sugar daddy already? Is that it? Some old geezer taking you for a spin? No, Elise said. I don't need a daddy. I have a brother. Mark paused. You don't have a brother. You told me you were an only child from a farm in Nebraska. I told you I was raised on a farm in Nebraska, Elise corrected. I never said I was an only child, and I never said whose farm it was. Suddenly a deep rumbling sound shook the tarmac. It wasn't the whining buzz of Mark's rented Hawker jet. It was the low, thunderous growl of massive Rolls-Royce Pearl 700 engines. A shadow fell over them. Mark looked up. Taxiing around the corner of the hangar was a beast. It was a Gulfstream G700, the pinnacle of private aviation. It was sleek black with gold trim and longer than some commercial airliners. It was a $75 million machine designed to fly closer to the speed of sound than any other civilian jet. On the tail, painted in elegant gold script, was a crest Mark recognized but couldn't place. A lion holding a key. Whose plane is that? Tiffany whispered, her eyes wide with greed. That thing is massive. The massive jet turned and parked directly in front of them, dwarfing Mark's rented plane like a wolf standing next to a chihuahua. The stairs automatically unfolded with a hydraulic hiss. Two pilots in pristine uniforms descended the stairs, followed by a flight attendant holding a silver tray with a glass of champagne. They walked right past Mark. They walked right past Tiffany. They stopped in front of Elise. Madam Chairwoman, the lead pilot said, bowing his head respectfully, we are fueled and ready for departure to Paris-Le Bourget. Your brother, Lord Julian, is already on board waiting for you. Mark's jaw dropped so hard it practically hit the asphalt. Madam, Chairwoman, Mark stammered. Elise took the glass of champagne from the tray, took a delicate sip, and looked at Mark. Oh, didn't I mention, she said casually. My maiden name isn't Smith Mark. That was my mother's name. My father's name was Sterling, as in the Sterling Group. The color drained from Mark's face so fast he looked like a corpse. The Sterling Group, he wheezed. The shipping conglomerate, the venture capital firm. And the private aviation manufacturer, Elise added helpfully, gesturing to the jet behind her. We actually built the engine components for that little plane you rented. You're welcome. Tiffany looked between them, panic setting in. Mark, what is she talking about? Is she rich? Rich? Elise laughed, a genuine melodious sound. Tiffany, Mark has about $4 million in assets, most of it leveraged debt. The Sterling Group's quarterly coffee budget is $4 million. She handed her empty glass to the attendant and signaled for her bags to be loaded. The ground crew moved with a speed and efficiency that Mark had never seen. They treated her trunks like holy relics. You lied to me, Mark whispered, his voice trembling with rage. For 6 years you pretended to be a nobody. You let me pay the mortgage. You let me buy you that cheap car. I didn't lie, Mark. Elise's voice dropped, turning icy. I omitted. I wanted to know if a man could love me for me, not for the billions my family controls. I wanted a life where I wasn't the Sterling heiress. I wanted to be just Elise. And for a while I thought we had that. She took a step closer to him. He flinched. I helped you, Mark. Who do you think introduced you to the logistics partners in China? Who do you think got your loan approved at Chase when your credit score was 580? I made a few calls. I pulled a few strings from the shadows. I built you up because I thought we were a team. You fixed the China deal. Mark looked like he was going to be sick. That deal was the cornerstone of his company. I created the China deal, she corrected. And now that I'm no longer your wife, I imagine the board of directors at Sterling Logistics, specifically my brother Julian, might reevaluate their partnership with a small volatile firm like Vance & Co. You can't do that, Mark gasped. The IPO, If we lose the China contracts, the IPO is dead in the water. I'll be ruined. Elise adjusted her sunglasses. You should have thought about that before you brought your mistress into my home, Mark. You broke the contract of our marriage. I'm just adjusting the other contracts. She turned toward the massive black jet. Wait, Elise. Mark lunged forward, but a large security guard who had materialized from the plane stepped in his path. The guard didn't say a word, just crossed his massive arms. Elise walked up the stairs. At the top, she turned back one last time. By the way, she called out over the roar of the engine starting to spool up. Enjoy the Hawker. I hear the seats in that model don't fully recline. It's going to be a long flight. She stepped inside and the door sealed shut with a heavy final thud. Mark and Tiffany stood on the tarmac, the wind from the Gulfstream's engines whipping their clothes as the massive jet began to taxi. Mark, Tiffany whined, tugging on his sleeve. Does this mean we aren't going shopping in Paris? Shut up, Tiffany! Mark screamed, staring at the black jet as it turned onto the runway. He watched as it picked up speed, defying gravity, and shot into the clouds, taking his future, his fortune, and his ex-wife with it. His phone buzzed in his pocket. Then it buzzed again. Then it started ringing. He looked down. It was his CFO. This is it, Mark thought. The beginning of the end. The interior of the Gulfstream G700 was quieter than a library and more opulent than most five-star hotels. The cabin was pressurized to a lower altitude than commercial jets, meaning the air felt fresh, not recycled. The seats were upholstered in hand-stitched cream leather, and the cabinetry was crafted from rare mahogany that gleamed under the warm ambient LED lighting. Elise sank into a club seat that immediately adjusted to her body temperature. She let out a breath she felt she had been holding for 6 years. The trembling started in her hands not from fear, but from the adrenaline crash. Here, a deep, resonant voice said. Elise looked up. Julian Sterling, the current CEO of the Sterling Group, and her older brother placed a glass of aged whiskey on the side table. Julian was 38, with the kind of sharp, aristocratic features that made him a regular on the cover of Forbes and GQ. He was wearing a casual cashmere sweater that probably cost more than Mark's entire wardrobe. I told you I didn't need alcohol, Jules, Elise said, though she picked up the glass. It's not for the need. It's for the celebration, Julian said, sitting opposite her. The papers, they are signed. Elise nodded, taking a sip. The amber liquid burned pleasantly, going down. Signed, sealed, and delivered. I am officially divorced. I walked away with $50,000 in a Honda Civic. Julian let out a dark, incredulous laugh. $50,000 for the woman who personally redesigned the supply chain algorithms that saved his company $3 million last year. He got a bargain. He thinks he won, Elise said, looking out the large oval window as the earth fell away beneath them. He thinks I'm destitute. He even offered me a job reference. Julian's eyes narrowed. The protective brother in him flared up. I can crush him, Elle. You know that. I can make one phone call to the SEC, one call to the IRS. I can have him auditing paper clips in a federal prison by Tuesday. Elise shook her head slowly. No, that's too easy. Prison is a punishment for criminals. Mark isn't a criminal. He's a narcissist. To punish a narcissist, you don't take his freedom. You take his audience. You take his status. You let him climb to the very top of the mountain, and then you kick the ladder away. She reached into her oversized tote bag and pulled out a slim, secure laptop. Is the IPO still scheduled for Tuesday morning? She asked. Yes, Julian confirmed. Vance & Company is set to debut on the NASDAQ. The opening price is projected at $28 a share. If it holds, Mark will be worth about $40 million on paper. And the valuation? Elise typed quickly, her fingers flying across the keyboard, is based almost entirely on the exclusive logistics contract with the Brown Corporation in Shanghai. Correct? Correct. 90% of his revenue stream comes from shipping Brown electronics to the U.S. market. Elise stopped typing. She looked at Julian. And who owns the shipping containers that Brown uses? Julian smiled. It was a wicked smile. Sterling Maritime. And who insures the cargo? Sterling Insurance. And who holds the debt regarding the fuel credits for his transport fleet? Sterling Capital. Elise closed the laptop with a satisfying click. Mark built a house of cards, Julian, but he forgot that he built it on our land. Initiate Protocol 0. Julian raised an eyebrow. 0. That's the scorched earth policy, L. Are you sure it will cost us a few million in broken contract fees? Do it? Elise said, her voice hard. The contract for his logistics support has a moral turpitude clause. It states that if the principal leadership engages in behavior that damages the reputation of the partners, the contract can be voided immediately. He cheated on his wife. Julian shrugged. It's sleazy, but is it enough to trigger the clause? It is when the wife he cheated on is a primary shareholder of the parent company he relies on, Elise said. Send the notice. Time it for exactly 9:35 a.m. on Tuesday, 5 minutes after he rings the opening bell. Julian pulled out his phone. It will be a pleasure. The flight attendant reappeared with a plate of truffled risotto. Madam Captain says we have a strong tailwind. We'll be in Paris an hour ahead of schedule. Elise leaned back, closing her eyes. Good. I need to go shopping. If I'm going to destroy my ex-husband, I need a new dress. Paris was raining, but it was the kind of romantic cinematic rain that makes the cobblestones glisten. Mark Vance didn't notice the romance. He was too busy screaming at the concierge of the Hotel Plaza Athénée. What do you mean, declined? Mark shouted, his face turning a blotchy red. Run it again. It's a platinum card. The concierge, a man with infinite patience, sighed. Monsieur Vance, we have run it 3 times. The bank has put a hold on the card. Perhaps you would like to use another. Tiffany, standing behind him in a fur coat she had made him buy at the airport duty-free, rolled her eyes. Oh my God, Mark, this is embarrassing. Just use the company card. I can't use the company card for personal expenses 2 days before the IPO. The auditors are watching everything, Mark hissed at her. He eventually found a debit card that worked, depleting his personal savings account to secure the suite. They went up to the room, the mood sour. Don't worry, babe, Mark said, popping a bottle of champagne from the minibar, which he would have to pay for later. In 48 hours, none of this matters. I'll buy the hotel. Tuesday morning arrived with a nervous energy. Because of the time difference, the New York Stock Exchange opened at 3:30 p.m. Paris time. Mark had rented a private conference room at the hotel set up with multiple screens to watch the launch. He was wearing a custom tuxedo holding a glass of scotch. Tiffany was wearing a glittering red dress, scrolling through her phone looking for mentions of herself in the press. 5 minutes to open, Mark said, pacing. This is it. The ticker is VANC. On the large center screen, the CNBC broadcast showed the floor of the stock exchange. The commentators were talking about the day's IPO. Small but aggressive logistics firm Vance & Co. debuting today. Analysts are bullish, largely due to their ironclad monopoly on the Brown distribution route. Hear that? Mark pointed at the screen. Ironclad. That's me. I'm the Iron Man of logistics. The bell rang. The trading began. Vanc opened at $28. Within seconds, it jumped to $32. Yes. Mark punched the air. We're up. We're flying. He grabbed Tiffany and kissed her aggressively. I'm rich. I'm filthy rich. At 9:34 a.m., New York time, the stock hit $35. At 9:35 a.m., a notification flashed on the bottom of the CNBC screen. Breaking news: Sterling Group severs all ties with Vance & Co. Mark froze. What? The news anchor stopped mid-sentence. Wait, we have breaking news coming across the wire. The Sterling Group, the multinational conglomerate, has just issued a press release. They are immediately terminating all shipping insurance and credit line agreements with Vance & Co., citing breach of contract and leadership instability. What? Mark screamed, dropping his glass. It shattered on the floor. They can't do that. We have a contract. On the screen, the graph for Vank stopped climbing. It hovered for a terrifying second. Then it fell off a cliff. $35. $28. $20. This is catastrophic, the anchor said, her voice rising in excitement. Without the sterling infrastructure, Vance & Co. has no ships, no containers, and no insurance. They are effectively paralyzed. The Brown Corporation has also just tweeted that they are suspending operations with Vance pending an investigation. 15. 10. Stop it. Stop trading, Mark yelled at the TV as if the traders could hear him. He scrambled for his phone, dialing his CFO. Peter, what is happening? Stop the bleeding. I can't. Peter's voice was hysterical on the other end. Sterling pulled the credit line. Mark, the bank just called the loan. They want the $40 million immediately. We're insolvent. We're bankrupt. $5. $2. In 10 minutes, Mark Vance went from being worth $40 million to being worth negative $40 million. The stock was halted for volatility, but the damage was done. The company was a smoking crater. Mark sank into the chair, staring blankly at the screen. It's a mistake. It has to be a mistake. He looked up at Tiffany. She wasn't looking at the screen. She was looking at him with pure disgust. You said you were worth $40 million, she said, her voice cold. It's a glitch, Tiff. We'll fix it. I just need to call Elise. She knows people at Sterling. Wait. The realization hit him like a physical blow. I have a brother. Madam Chairwoman. Protocol 0. She did this, Mark whispered. Elise did this. Tiffany stood up. She grabbed her purse. Where are you going? Mark asked. Out, Tiffany said. Babe, I need you. I need you to help me think. Help you? Tiffany laughed. Mark, look at the TV. You're broke. Worse than broke, you're in debt. I don't do debt. But we're a team, Mark stammered. We were a team when you were a CEO, Tiffany said, walking to the door. Now you're just a loser in a tuxedo you probably can't afford to dry clean. Tiffany, Mark chased after her. You can't leave me. I paid for this trip. I bought you that dress. She turned at the door. Consider it severance pay for a mediocre affair. She slammed the door. Mark was alone. The silence in the hotel room was deafening. On the TV, the red arrow pointed down, down, down. His phone rang. It wasn't his CFO this time. It was a number he didn't recognize. He answered it slowly. Hello. Hello, Mark. It was Elise's voice, clear, calm, and utterly victorious. Elise, he croaked. You destroyed me. I merely balanced the books, Mark, she said. I told you I was good at budgeting. Why? He sobbed. Why go this far? You could have just divorced me. I did divorce you, Elise said. But you insulted my intelligence. You insulted my family. And worst of all, you tried to make me feel small so you could feel big. I just wanted to show you Mark. There is always a bigger fish. I'll sue you, Mark screamed. I'll sue the Sterling Group. With what money? Elise asked. Your lawyers just resigned. I know because I just hired them. There was a pause. Check your email, Mark, she said. There is a one-way ticket back to New York. Economy class. Middle seat. It leaves in 3 hours. I'd suggest you take it. The hotel manager is coming up to evict you in about 5 minutes. Elise, wait. Please. I still love you. Mark tried the desperation leaking out of him. Elise laughed. It was the last time he would ever hear that sound. Goodbye, Mark. The line went dead. 3 months had passed since the crash of Vance & Co. The scandal had been the talk of Wall Street for weeks. Then it faded, as all scandals do, replaced by the next big failure. Mark Vance was currently living in a studio apartment in Queens. He had sold the Rolex. He had sold the car. He was working as a junior consultant for a trucking firm, A job he got only because his old college roommate took pity on him. But Mark hadn't given up. He was obsessed. He spent his nights reading articles about Elise Sterling, heiress to the Sterling Empire, announces new philanthropic initiative. Elise Sterling spotted at Milan Fashion Week. Elise Sterling to host the Winter Solstice Gala at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. The gala. That was his chance. Mark convinced himself that if he could just see her, if he could just talk to her face to face without lawyers or phones, he could charm her back. He could explain that he had changed. He could get access to the money again. He spent his last $1,000 renting a tuxedo and bribing a caterer to get him a staff pass for the event. The Metropolitan Museum was transformed into a winter wonderland. White roses covered every surface. The elite of New York were there, senators, movie stars, tech moguls. Mark, wearing a waiter's jacket he had stolen from the cloakroom over his tuxedo shirt, moved through the crowd carrying a tray of empty champagne flutes to blend in. His eyes scanned the room frantically, and then he saw her. She was standing at the top of the stairs near the Temple of Dendur. She looked breathtaking. She was wearing a midnight blue velvet gown that hugged her curves with diamonds dripping from her ears and neck diamonds that were real heirlooms of the Sterling family. She wasn't alone. Standing next to her with a hand possessively on the small of her back was a man. He was tall with broad shoulders and a rugged, intense jawline. He wasn't a soft, corporate type like Mark. He looked dangerous. He looked like a wolf in a suit. Mark recognized him instantly. Everyone knew him. Damon Salvatore. No, that was a vampire. This was Damon Wolfe, the CEO of Wolfe Industries, a rival to the Sterling Group in size but far more aggressive. He was known as the Corporate Raider. He destroyed companies for sport. And he was looking at Elise like she was the only woman in the world. Mark felt a surge of jealousy so hot it almost blinded him. He abandoned his tray on a statue and marched up the stairs. Security was lax near the VIPs because they assumed everyone there belonged. "Elise," Mark called out, his voice cracking. The conversation around them stopped. The music seemed to fade. Elise turned. When she saw him, her expression didn't change. She didn't look scared. She didn't look angry. She looked bored. "Mark," she said, "I didn't know the caterers were allowed to mingle with the guests." "I need to talk to you," Mark said, stepping closer, ignoring the murmurs of the crowd. "Alone." Damon Wolfe stepped forward. He didn't say a word. He just moved his body between Mark and Elise. He towered over Mark. His eyes were like chips of ice. "Is this the ex-husband?" Damon asked, his voice a low rumble that vibrated in Mark's chest. "He is," Elise said, placing a calming hand on Damon's arm. "Damon, this is Mark. Mark, this is Damon." "I know who he is," Mark spat. "Elise, please. I've changed. I'm living in Queens. I'm suffering. Haven't you punished me enough? I'm your husband." "Ex-husband," Damon corrected. "We had something real," Mark pleaded, reaching for her hand. Damon caught Mark's wrist in midair. He didn't twist it. He just held it. His grip was like a steel vise. Mark gasped in pain. "Touch her again," Damon whispered, "and you won't need a lawyer. You'll need a surgeon." "Let him go, Damon," Elise said softly. Damon released him with a shove. Mark stumbled back, rubbing his wrist. "Mark," Elise said, stepping forward so she was looking down at him on the stairs. "You aren't suffering because I punished you. You are suffering because for the first time in your life you have to work for what you get. You are living the life you actually earned." "I can be better," Mark cried. "Give me another chance. Not as a husband. Give me a job. Any job. I know the logistics systems. I can help you." The crowd was watching. Phones were out. This was being live-streamed. Elise sighed. "You want a job?" "Yes, please," Mark begged. Elise looked at Damon. "Darling, didn't you say your warehouse in New Jersey was looking for night shift staff?" Damon smirked. "We are. Minimum wage. Heavy lifting, no benefits for the first year." Elise turned back to Mark. There you go. Go to the Wolf Industries warehouse in Newark on Monday at 6 a.m. Ask for the foreman. Tell him Elise sent you. You want me to be a box packer? Mark stared at her, horrified. It's honest work, Mark, Elise said. It builds character, and God knows you need some. She turned her back on him. Security, please show this guest out. He's upsetting the vibe. Two massive guards appeared instantly, grabbing Mark by the arms. Elise, you can't do this. I was a CEO, Mark screamed as they dragged him away, his feet scraping against the marble floor. Elise didn't look back. She took Damon's arm. Shall we dance? She asked. We shall, Damon said, leading her onto the floor. Remind me never to get on your bad side, Mrs. Sterling. Ms. Sterling, she corrected with a smile. And don't worry, you have nothing to fear, as long as you're loyal. 6 months later. The winter in Newark, New Jersey was not just cold, it was a physical assault. It was the kind of damp industrial freeze that ignored coats and settled directly into the marrow of your bones. Mark Vance stood on the concrete loading dock of Wolf Industries Distribution Center, Sector 4. The wind whipped off the Passaic River, carrying the smell of diesel fumes and freezing rain. He was shivering violently, but not just from the cold. He was shivering from exhaustion. He wore a neon orange safety vest that was 2 sizes too big, thrown over a gray hoodie he had bought at a thrift store. His hands, once manicured and soft from years of handling nothing heavier than a Mont Blanc fountain pen or a crystal whiskey tumbler, were now unrecognizable. They were raw, chapped, and covered in small cuts from endless cardboard edges. His fingernails were broken. His knuckles were swollen. Vance, what are you doing dreaming about your glory days? The voice cracked like a whip. It was Kowalski, the night shift foreman. Kowalski was a man the size of a vending machine who took a specific sadistic pleasure in managing a former CEO. He knew exactly who Mark was. Everyone did. I'm wrapping the pallet, Kowalski, Mark stammered, his breath puffing out in white clouds. The plastic roll. It got stuck. You're too slow, Vance, Kowalski sneered, stepping closer. He smelled of stale tobacco and onions. Truck 402 is leaving in 8 minutes. If this load isn't secured, you're docked an hour's pay. And considering your wages are currently being garnished for 3 different lawsuits, I don't think you can afford to lose a dime. Mark grit his teeth. He wanted to scream. He wanted to fire this man. He wanted to call security. But he had no security. He had no power. He grabbed the heavy roll of industrial plastic wrap and began to circle the pallet of toilet seat covers. Round and round. He pulled the plastic tight, the friction burning his palms. He was dizzy. He hadn't eaten a real meal in 2 days. After the rent for his basement studio in Queens, the court ordered restitution payments to his former creditors, and the surprise child support for a daughter he had ignored for 10 years who suddenly needed college tuition, Mark was living on instant ramen and tap water. Round and round. He was the Iron Man of logistics, wrapping toilets for minimum wage. A loud buzzer sounded, echoing through the cavernous warehouse. 3:00 a.m. Lunch break. The workers shuffled toward the break room like zombies. Mark followed them, keeping his head down. He didn't talk to the other workers. They knew he was the guy who crashed a company and lost $40 million in a day. They didn't pity him. They loathed him. The break room was a grim box with fluorescent lights that hummed like dying insects. There were 4 vending machines, but 2 were broken, and the other 2 only took cash. Mark didn't have cash. He walked over to the water cooler, filled a paper cup, and sat at the metal table in the back corner. On the wall, mounted high up near the ceiling, was a dusty flat-screen television. It was always tuned to the Global Business Network GBN. Most of the workers ignored it, preferring to stare at their phones. But for Mark, it was a form of self-flagellation. He couldn't stop watching the world he used to rule. "Hey, turn that up," one of the forklift drivers shouted to the guy near the remote. "They're talking about the bonus checks." The volume increased. Mark looked up, wiping sweat from his forehead with a dirty sleeve. The screen wasn't showing the warehouse bonus structure. It was showing a live feed from Zurich, Switzerland. The banner at the bottom of the screen pulsed with urgent red letters, "Live the merger of the Century press conference." Mark felt his stomach drop. The camera panned over a stage that looked more like a coronation than a business meeting. The backdrop was a massive digital wall displaying the new company logo, a stylized wolf intertwined with a golden key. And there they were. Seated at a sleek glass table were two figures who looked like gods compared to the tired gray men in the break room. Damon Wolf sat on the right. He wore a tuxedo that fit his broad shoulders perfectly, looking every inch the predator he was known to be. He looked dangerous, relaxed, and utterly in control. On the left sat Elise. Mark stopped breathing. She was radiant. She wore a white structural suit with a plunging neckline adorned with a single massive sapphire necklace. Her hair was pulled back in a severe, elegant bun. She didn't look like the librarian anymore. She didn't look like the nice wife who baked bread. She looked like an empress. "Truly a historic moment," the British news anchor narrated. "The finalized merger between the Sterling Group and Wolf Industries has created the largest logistics conglomerate in human history. Their combined market cap as of this morning sits at $150 billion. A collective whistle went through the break room. "Damn," the forklift driver muttered. "That's a lot of zeros." Mark felt bile rise in his throat. That should have been him. If he had just held on, if he hadn't cheated. "But the real story today," the anchor continued, "is the unveiling of their proprietary technology. They are calling it the Athena Protocol. Analysts are saying this AI-driven system will revolutionize global trade, predicting supply chain disruptions before they even happen." Mark froze. The plastic cup in his hand crushed inward. Athena. He knew that name. Years ago, back when he and Elise were first married, he had toyed with an idea. He wanted to build an algorithm that used weather patterns and political news to reroute ships automatically. He had called it Project Hermes. He had worked on it for months, but the code was too complex. He was a salesman, not a coder. He had abandoned it, assuming the files were lost when he switched laptops. On the screen, a reporter from the Financial Times stood up to ask a question. "Ms. Sterling," the reporter asked, her voice echoing in the silent warehouse break room, "the Athena Protocol is being hailed as the holy grail of shipping. It's estimated to save the industry $400 billion in waste over the next decade. Did you hire an external firm to build this code?" Elise smiled. It was a slow, terrifyingly confident smile. She leaned into the microphone. "No," she said, her voice crystal clear. "I wrote the core architecture myself." Mark blinked. "She wrote it. I started writing it 7 years ago." Elise continued, looking directly into the camera lens. "I was living in a small apartment in Manhattan. My husband at the time, well, he was often out late. Working," he said. A ripple of laughter went through the audience in Zurich. "So, to pass the lonely hours I coded," Elise said. "I took his initial flawed concept, Project Hermes, and I fixed it. I expanded it. I perfected it. But I never told him. I knew he wouldn't understand the complexity. And frankly, I knew he would try to sell it before it was ready." "So you hid it," the reporter pressed. "Where do you hide $1 billion algorithm?" "I kept the only copy of the source key on an encrypted external hard drive," Elise explained. "And I kept that hard drive in the one place I knew my husband would never, ever look. A place he considered beneath him." The reporter leaned in. "And where was that?" Elise's eyes danced with amusement. "In the glove box of my 2018 Honda Civic." The silence in the break room was deafening. Mark felt the blood drain from his face, leaving him dizzy and cold. The Civic. The memory hit him like a physical blow to the chest. He was back in the conference room. The rain was hitting the window. His lawyer Sterling Archer was reading the terms. Elise, you are waiving your right to the primary residence. You are accepting a one-time cash settlement and retaining ownership of the 2018 Honda Civic. Is that correct? He remembered his own voice dripping with arrogance and disdain. You're not even going to fight for the dog or the artwork. He remembered laughing at her. He remembered thinking she was pathetic for wanting that old dented car with the coffee stain on the passenger seat. Oh my God, Mark whispered. His hands were shaking so badly he knocked his water over. He fumbled for his pocket, pulling out his cracked Android phone. His thumb slipped on the screen as he frantically searched his email archives. Search divorce decree. Final. PDF. He found it. The document was dated 6 months ago. He opened it, pinching the screen to zoom in on the fine print. He scrolled past the alimony waiver. He scrolled past the property division. He found Section 4, Paragraph C, asset allocation. He read the words and they blurred through his tears. The party of the second part. Elise Vance shall retain sole ownership of the 2018 Honda Civic VN, ending in 5592, including all mechanical parts, accessories and contents contained within the vehicle at the time of signing. Contents contained within. It was a standard clause. A throwaway line lawyers used so couples wouldn't sue each other over forgotten sunglasses or gym bags. But in this case, contents contained within referred to a hard drive worth $400 billion. Mark dropped the phone. It clattered onto the dirty linoleum floor. He hadn't just lost the company, he hadn't just lost the wife. He had literally signed away the keys to the kingdom. He had handed her the weapon she used to conquer the world, and he had done it with a smirk on his face. On the TV, the interview was wrapping up. Ms. Sterling, the reporter asked one final question. Is there anyone you would like to dedicate this success to? Perhaps a mentor? Elise paused. She looked at Damon Wolfe. Damon took her hand, squeezing it supportively. The power dynamic was clear. They were partners equals. Actually, yes, Elise said. I'd like to thank my ex-husband, Mark. The workers in the break room turned to look at Mark. He couldn't move. He felt like he was burning alive. He taught me the most valuable lesson of my life, Elise said, her voice dropping an octave, becoming deadly serious. He taught me that arrogance is a blinder. He was so busy looking at himself in the mirror that he never bothered to look in the glove box. He taught me that if you underestimate the quiet ones, you don't just lose the game, you lose everything. She smiled one last time. Thank you, Mark. I couldn't have done it without your signature. The feed cut to the stock ticker. Sterling Wolfe, swell F up, 400%. Hey, Vance. Kowalski kicked the break room door open. Break is over. Get your ass back on the line. We have 3 more trucks to load before sunrise. Mark looked at the foreman. He looked at the other workers who were now whispering and pointing at him, realizing exactly who he was and what he had done. The humiliation was total. It was absolute. Mark let out a sound. It wasn't a cry. It was a laugh. A broken, jagged, hysterical laugh that sounded like glass shattering. I signed it, he wheezed, rocking back and forth. I gave her the car. I gave her the car. What is wrong with you? Kowalski barked. Move! Mark stood up slowly. His legs felt like lead. He walked past his phone, leaving it on the floor. He walked out of the break room back into the freezing cold warehouse. He walked back to the pallet of toilet seats. He picked up the heavy roll of plastic wrap. Round and round. He started wrapping. Scratch, scratch, scratch. The sound of the plastic stretching was exactly the same as the sound of his fountain pen on the day he signed his life away. 30,000 feet above the Atlantic Ocean, the world was silent. The Gulfstream G700, the flagship of the newly formed Sterling Wolfe aviation fleet, cut through the stratosphere at Mach 0.925. The cabin was dim lit only by the soft amber glow of the LED strips along the floor. Elise Sterling sat in the master suite, her legs curled under her. She had changed out of the power suit and into a silk robe. In her hand she held a glass of 1982 Petrus. She was looking out the window, watching the curvature of the earth. The sun was setting behind them, casting long purple shadows across the cloud tops. The door to the suite opened softly. Damon walked in. He had loosened his tie and unbuttoned his collar. He looked tired, but triumphant. "The board is ecstatic," he said, sitting on the edge of the plush leather seat opposite her. "The stock price is holding steady at $300 a share. We are officially the most valuable company in the sector." "Good," Elise said quietly. She took a sip of the wine. "And the logistics integration?" "Smooth," Damon said. "The Athena protocol is already online. It rerouted 20 ships away from a typhoon in the Pacific 10 minutes ago. We saved $6 million in fuel in the first hour." He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. He studied her face. "You know," he said, a small smirk playing on his lips, "that was cold, El. Thanking him on international television, that was brutal." Elise turned her gaze from the window to him. Her eyes were calm, devoid of the anger that had fueled her for so long. "He wanted to be famous, Damon," she said simply. "He always wanted to be a household name. I just gave him what he wanted." "I think he would have preferred the money," Damon chuckled. "He had the money," Elise replied. "He had the wife. He had the life. He threw it away for a 24-year-old assistant and an ego trip. Mark didn't lose his fortune today, Damon. He lost it 6 months ago when he decided that I was disposable." Damon reached out, taking her hand. His grip was warm and solid. "Well, his loss is my gain. Remind me never to get on your bad side, Mrs. Sterling." "Ms. Sterling," she corrected him, her fingers interlacing with his. "And don't worry. You have nothing to fear, as long as you check the glove box." Damon laughed, a rich, genuine sound that filled the cabin. "Point taken." Elise looked back out the window. Far below, under the layers of clouds and darkness, she knew Mark was there. He was likely freezing. He was likely tired. He was living the reality of the working class he had mocked for years. The scales of the universe had balanced perfectly. "So," Damon said, pouring himself a glass of wine, "we have the merger. We have the billions. We have the fastest jet in the world. What's next?" Elise smiled. It wasn't the vengeful smile of a scorned woman anymore. It was the ambitious smile of a builder. "Next," she said, clinking her glass against his, "next we buy the airport he's flying out of." "I love the way you think," Damon whispered. "To the quiet ones," Elise toasted. "To the quiet ones," Damon replied. "May they never be silenced again." The massive jet engines roared a deep, powerful hum that vibrated through the floor, pushing them faster, higher, leaving the past far behind in the cold, dark distance. And that is exactly why you never judge a book by its cover, and you definitely never judge a wife by her silence. Mark thought he was the king of the world because he had a loud voice and a fancy suit, but he forgot the golden rule of power: the person holding the pen holds the future. He didn't just lose his money, he lost his dignity, his legacy, and the billion-dollar idea he was too arrogant to see, all because he couldn't be bothered to look inside a Honda Civic. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? How many people are you overlooking right now? Who is the Elise in your life that you're underestimating? Because as Mark learned, the most dangerous person in the room isn't the one shouting threats. It's the one sitting quietly waiting for you to hand them the pen. If you enjoyed this story of ultimate karma and betrayal, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss a new story. And tell me in the comments below, if you were Elise, would you have given Mark a job, or would you have left him with nothing? I read every comment. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.